you see them as having misinterpreted it in the same way that you see Jordan Peterson is doing it, or in other ways?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think like Pierre Corey is
and then why would you go back to weaker evidence that shows a big effect? It's like, wait, hold on, it's like, wait, hold on, we studied this.
Welcome.
Hi.
I wasn't planning on making another video addressing ivermectin for quite some time, and I certainly wasn't planning on making another video dealing with some misinformation or misunderstandings in one of Dr. John Campbell's videos. And today, I feel obliged to address some of those issues in a recent video of John Campbell's, as well as some other misinformation sources that have basically turned a molehill into a mountain, taking a conference abstract into ivermectin misinformation. I'm happy today to be having a conversation with Yakov Efemenko, who is the first author of the conference abstract in question. So let's get started. Yakov, thanks for joining me. Can you start by giving us a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Yakov. I'm a medical student at the University of Miami. I'm in my fourth year. I'll be finishing in May, and I'm going into actually plastic surgery.
This guy looks like he works at a Ukrainian bioweapons lab. Anybody else? 100%.
Okay, great. So can you tell me a little bit, how'd you get kind of pulled into this conversation that we're having today?
Yeah. So during my 2020-2021 academic year, I was doing research in urology, doing clinical trials, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials at the University of Miami, just learning about research. And I got around to working with Trinetics, which is the large federated EMR network, right, which we use the data to pull information for this abstract that we're going to be discussing. And the topic of COVID at the time was very hot, obviously, ivermectin. I was actually on another paper, part of my team, where we tested semen parameters of patients pre and post vaccination, and I got a lot of traction on JAMA. It was the #1 article for a while. I'm a contributing author in there, so because there's a limitation to this, I alerted the editor. Regardless, got around with working Trinets and decided to ask the question that was kind of circulating at the time regarding ivermectin, because it was like everywhere. I think President Trump was talking about it. Like you heard on Joe Rogan Experience, you heard it kind of like everywhere. And just being kind of like a curious person, and somebody who's doing research at the time, decided to investigate that issue using this federated network of 68 million patients.
Right, and so then that turned into an abstract at a meeting, right?
Right. So we wrote it, I believe, July 2021, and we submitted it around September 2021. Okay. I ended up presenting it at the IMED conference in, I think it's October. I might be slightly off a couple weeks, October or early November. And then, I just didn't really hear anything about it at all. Just brushed it off, forgot about it. Actually, that's a little bit false, because I did write a manuscript for the full paper. Okay. Submitted the manuscript to American Journal of Therapeutics. They rejected it with like a lot of feedback. And then basically they said it's not going to be acceptable for this journal. So we submitted it to the IJID journal, which was where the conference was.
I see. Okay. Right. So what we're seeing here is the conference abstract itself. So does that mean it will turn into a full paper in the journal, or is it in the proceedings as the abstract? This is how it's coming out? Yeah.
No. So I submitted the paper. We got a lot of comments on it, and we basically, there was a lot of confounding variables, a lot of issues with it. Things that would definitely need a lot of reworking. And after talking to my professor, Dr. Zamora Gonzalez, and other people I worked with, we just decided to pull it because we didn't think it was really beneficial to pursue this issue. And by that time, this is like December now, you already had more data. You had like RCTs coming out, investigating the issue and really pointing in the other direction. So I just didn't think there would be much value to pursuing that any further.
I see. And then, so I'm going to put up here, then basically just a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago now, it got picked up on Twitter. And this is the first I saw of it, was a tweet by...
Oh, so this isn't even a peer-reviewed... Well, I thought when this was linked, I thought it was linked in an actual journal. Or were those... I thought, am I crazy? So this wasn't even like a peer-reviewed study? It was just like abstract notes for a conference or something, or...
Great. Talking about this... and your advisor responded, right? So this is referring to your abstract, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then your advisor responded with this?
Yeah, that's right. I remember he messaged me about this. Actually, he messaged me a couple days after that, when I think it picked up more traction, and he was like a little bit worried. So
right, and so he seems pretty adamant in his response to Pierre Corey, and then I saw you responded to Dr. Corey as well, very politely. Great afternoon, I'm the first author of that paper. I believe the data in the study is being misrepresented and misinterpreted. And then that went on, and so then there was another one from Dr. Jordan Peterson, and then another one. All right, so another one from John Campbell, and then John Campbell's own video. On it, which was retweeted by this other person.
Dude, the story of that John Campbell guy is actually so sad. Oh my God. I saw a Twitter thread that was comparing early videos of his to like where he's at like a year later. Did I retweet that? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Holy shit. When people start getting money for catering to certain crowds. Wait, somebody link me the video that I tweeted. I don't know what's on my Twitter. I don't know if I can search it. I don't know if it's safe. This is just...
Now, there's been reports that there's been 1,170 deaths in the United States after vaccinations. Am I concerned about that? The answer is no, and I'll show you why. We have similar data from the UK, smaller numbers, but again, I'm not concerned, and I'll tell you why I'm not concerned. And it is a pity that the anti-vaxxers are sort of latching on to this and using it for their own purposes, but stick with us and I'll tell you why I'm not concerned. Now, there's been reports that there's been one already safely received COVID-19 vaccine, we recognise that for some time the FDA approval of a vaccine may now install additional confidence to get vaccinated. So, in other words, this is the move from emergency
tiny nuts
use approval to formal approval. Now, she's saying safely here, but at this time, my understanding is she would have had access to this document. So how would you say it's safe when this document is indicating there's been 1,223 associated deaths? What, did she have access to this data then?
Which chat?
If so, how can she say it's safely? Let me know if you understand that, because it doesn't make too much sense to me. I think you can tell I'm not a happy man. Already safe.
Whatever, dude.
Again, the same response every time. I'm the first author, I believe, this paper is being misinterpreted. I'd like to reach out. So maybe now, if you could maybe go into, so how do you see those misinterpretations happening? I mean, this is obviously blown up. You've got more readers of your abstract now
because
than
I'm putting 100%
probably by the order of magnitude or two than you had at the conference, I expect.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. How do I believe it's being misinterpreted?
Yeah.
I think you have to look at what it actually is, right? So this is an abstract from a conference. This is a retrospective cohort study. In the grand scheme of things, quality of evidence, this is on the lower tier of evidence. Whilst at the time it was appropriate to do this kind of research, and that's what we did. It is not appropriate anymore, really, to do this kind of research, I think, and nonetheless, draw conclusions from. You would never draw conclusions from retrospective cohort studies. Remember, this is just an association study, right? That's what we report. We report in association, odds risks. And I've seen tweets and other stuff that are saying 69% probability of reduced mortality, which is just completely incorrect. So people are flipping words around, doing calculations 1 minus OR to get probability or something like that, and completely misrepresenting the data. And then you have Jordan Peterson, which I actually watch his stuff. I watched his stuff before, but I think it's very irresponsible to make a tweet like that and say it's just a bombshell. I don't think he even read it, or I don't think he even looked at what it is. It's an abstract from a conference by medical students. As much as I want to be proud of this, this is you know what I mean. There's not much stuff to be proud of here.
So, there was another thing related to COVID-19. I don't know if it was ivermectin or what. Maybe it was vaccines, but people were citing this. Does anybody remember? People were citing something like it was a massive study proving some huge thing that the mainstream didn't want you to know. But the source, if you actually went through it, it wasn't a study at all. It was it was an abstract from a conference. It was just a speech somebody was giving at a conference. There was no huge data set, huge study. None of that even existed, which is not true. I don't remember what that was about, but yeah, this happens sometimes.
I really respect the way you're coming at this. I mean, for a lot of people, a lot of scientists, as you know, I'm sure you've seen this, people get out on a limb with something that they've done, and they really have a hard time kind of rethinking that or changing their minds. Now, of course, Jordan Peterson is not in the field. He's not a medical professional. But Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. John Campbell both are, and they both also made very strong representations about the implications of this paper. Do you see their misinterpretations, or do you see them as having misinterpreted it in the same way that you see Jordan Peterson is doing it, or in other ways?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Pierre Corey necessarily stated that there was anything profoundly, this massive study, right? Massive study comparing mortality rates. It's just the wording and the propagation of information that they're trying to do to kind of clearly push a narrative, right? They have a dog in the race at this point, right? These people have large followings. They have John Campbell has 2.25 million YouTube subscribers. He's making money from YouTube. For him to backtrack on that information means he's wrong. And
this Pierre Corey guy, if you guys remember, we read about him in Sweden. That was the guy that was part of the, he was one of the founders or leaders or whatever of that frontline COVID-19 critical care alliance. He was one of those people that were trying to invent their own treatment protocol, and they were using ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and all these other massive zinc and vitamin C infusions and all this shit because they wanted to be the people to figure it out, to crack the code for treating COVID. Yeah.
So what is the organization he's from? Frontline COVID critical care workers. He's a well-established doctor. He's treated thousands.
So now we know more. So the FLCCC is tantamount to medical lunacy. We don't trust anything these people say. This is not a credible organization. They're not. It's not a whole giant body of doctors that are going through peer-reviewed evidence. It's a bunch of people that want to create novel protocol treatments for COVID-19. It's not and this guy's treated thousands of patients, blah blah. No, he was an ICU doctor, I think.
He's a well-established doctor. He's treated thousands of people with COVID, and they've early on in the pandemic they found some good efficacy with ivermectin. Frontline 19 Critical Care Alliance. Okay. Yeah.
That group, so people are really good at making group names that sound very official, the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Workers. That sounds like a really true, real, awesome group, right? But it's not, right? These are like, we don't care about these people. And that doctor Pierre Corey guy is not a super well established doctor that has like good evidence relating to ivermectin, right? The guy was quoting studies that we saw that had like literally fabricated data. Not to say that he fabricated data, but that he was quoting studies. The largest pro ivermectin study was fabricated and plagiarized, both.
Gonna maybe lose subscribers, lose ad revenue. So same thing with Pierre Corey. I don't know what his motives are. I'm not saying anything about his, credibility. I'm sure like he's a great doctor or whatnot, but there's like a narrative that they're pushing now at this point, and like the magnitude of how they're pushing it, I think is like very inappropriate, because it's truly an abstract from a conference. That's a retrospective study from 8 months ago, 2 variants ago. It really has like no relevance, especially. Yeah.
Were the abstracts from this conference peer reviewed?
It's like it's not a peer review process that normally a paper undergoes. No. I think there's like 2 reviewers from what I understand, and don't quote me because I don't know the exact specifics, because I just submitted it and I got accepted. There's like I think 2 reviewers from what I read, and it's like they just review the abstracts, however many abstracts they get. If they get 600, 700 abstracts, I mean mine was like numbered in the like 700, 800, something like that. They're getting a ton of abstracts. There's not much reviewing that they're doing. You know what I mean? So
right. I mean I've been to conferences where some conferences might have, they vary in terms of how much peer review they put in. Sometimes they're basically just trying to get screen for spam and creationism and things like that. So, Dr. Corey mentioned the size of the study. So he said it's a really massive study. And I don't know if you had a chance to see Dr. Campbell's video.
Yeah, I did watch that. I watched it.
So my read of that video, I don't have any excerpts from that here, and I'm not going to put them in this video, but he also made a point of talking about how large the study was. He compared it to the size of studies that he had done in clinical trials that he had been involved in, a really massive study. And is your view his misinterpretation is kind of along those same lines, kind of overemphasizing the conclusions and the size of the study, or is it other things?
So, I was watching this video and he's saying like, this is a great, well thought out study. Like, this is just an excellent study. And like, obviously like I did quality research, we, obviously didn't like falsify data or anything like that.
Sure.
But I don't think it's like that good of a study. It's a retrospective cohort study. It has extremely large limitations to what it actually means, right? And I think anybody that does research, like I ran like clinical trials, understand what it means. Like you can't prescribe somebody something even based on like phase 2 data, right? So like, why would you change clinical practice based on a retrospective cohort study? It just doesn't make sense to me why they're trying to overemphasize that.
When you say retrospective cohort, what they mean is they're looking at a whole bunch of people and then they're trying to group them and they say, okay, well, these people took that, those people took that. Maybe they'll try to disentangle something and then they'll say, like, what were the outcomes? But again, retrospectives, there's so much that you're not controlling for at that point. Retrospectives can be a really good way, like a good starting point, like, oh, wow, we noticed this in order. And then you go on to do further like prospective studies or other types of studies. But you would never just say like, oh my God, look at that retrospective cohort. Oh my God, we need to change everything's. It's like, no, okay, well, maybe it's a, place for further investigation. So it's really weird to hear somebody say that. That's like if somebody were to say that, my bullshit alarm would go off instantly and I would start doubting a lot of other things that they say. Yeah.
It just means maybe they didn't look at it close enough, or they're just again pushing that agenda for whatever reason. So sorry, then to elaborate, the size. Please. Yeah, the size is large. That's one of the good things about the study and why we did it was because we had access to this Trinetics EMR federated network, which does have an extremely large amount of data in it for the United States. But of course, it comes with like a lot of limitations. So.
Yeah, so you mentioned, I noticed in a couple of your tweets, and you've alluded here as well, that, of course, there are also many potential confounders, cofactors and so on, confounders that are difficult to account for in like a large retrospective observational study. You can't account for data that's not collected and confounders that aren't there. Is that a concern of yours in terms of the strength of the inference from the study?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that we elaborate on.
That's always a problem with retrospectives, is you don't have like strict controls. You don't have like these blinds in place to ensure that everything is like that. But that's just the nature of retrospectives. Again, they're a really good starting point, but you wouldn't draw any super strong conclusions about them.
In the full manuscript that I wrote that we ended up withdrawing, because you just don't have
the new Demon Mama video about you? No, link away. Is it new?
You're limited to 400 or 500 words in an abstract. You can't elaborate any of those things if you're trying to convey any kind of point across. But in the full manuscript that we wrote, some of the things that I wrote down.
It's like if me and 15 friends take a drug and it works, then you make a larger study to test it and it doesn't work. You wouldn't go back to the earlier, weaker evidence to say that it does work. Yeah, that's a good point too, because I think they've actually done large-scale studies now on ivermectin. I'm pretty sure they've done big RCTs on it, and it just doesn't look like. So if you have huge RCTs, randomized controlled trials, you have these huge things. Seems like there's no effect. And then why would you go back to weaker evidence that shows a big effect? It's like, oh, wait, hold on. It's like, well, wait, hold on. Wait, we studied this. It's been studied. Why would we go back to weaker evidence to try to find? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Again, maybe unless you missed something, kind of, but like you absolutely wouldn't go back to the weaker evidence and say that supersedes the stronger evidence. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that?
On here, I'll go over. So limitations, obviously it's like a retrospective study, so we cannot exclude possibility of confounding factors. That's just the nature of retrospective studies. Treatment dosage with ivermectin was widely varied. There's no unified protocol. Like who knows how much ivermectin each patient was receiving, because Trinetics doesn't have a way to screen for dosages at that time, at least. There was significant limitation for the ability to control for COVID-19 vaccination. Basically, we were unable to do that, and that's something we also wrote in the manuscript. So yeah, basically vaccination status was unaccounted for, because Trinetics was unreliable for that, because people get vaccines at a gas station here in Florida or like the church or whatever. So pretty much anywhere that doesn't go in your EMR. And also, I think most importantly, we weren't able to stratify patients based on severity of disease at that time. It's very possible that like patients that were receiving remdesivir had a much more complicated course of disease compared to patients receiving ivermectin. I think that's like one of the major confounders of that study.
Yeah, I've seen that discussed a little bit in the discussions just on social media, that that those patient groups are hard. It's hard to compare because of exactly that, those confounders and severity of disease and treatment, expected treatment outcomes and so on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate your coming and talking with me on such short notice.
Yeah, no problem.
I really appreciate it. And actually, so you, just as a side note, you got into the COVID world, you said, from a urology project, right?
Yeah. So the team I was working with, I was doing research for a year. They did a study where they looked at semen parameters pre and post vaccination, because obviously there's a lot of questions in the air, like, is the vaccine safe? Is it not safe? And that was published in JAMA, and it was like #1 trending for a while. So, and from that, kind of, I got a little bit interested in COVID. I mean, obviously everybody was interested because COVID was like looming in the air everywhere. So, and of course I was trying to be productive during my academic year and do scientific work, because that's also important for medical students here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thanks very much, and congratulations on the JAMA paper and the other research. I noticed your background in that area, and best of luck in your future career.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. TK. Have a great rest of your day.
All right,
take the time.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a good evening. Well, there we have it. Once again, I want to thank you.
Wow.
So there you go. About 70% less likely to die if you had ivermectin compared to remdesivir in this study. It's pretty convincing data from national databases.